faces that have been such a part of our lives. Well, Warwick's and my life together really began when we met in 1965 at that fateful demonstration for Aboriginal land rights. For me, it was love at first sight, and I shamelessly pursued him in what I'd come to realise was my first campaign. He's since told me that he knew straight away too, but it took him 2 months to finally say, let's get married. And I remember wondering what on earth was taking him so long when it was so obvious that that was what would happen. I've loved so many things about him over the years, and the list grew longer as I got to know him better, though he wasn't perfect. It's been quite difficult to decide what to say today in talking about our life together because it's been such a long time, 56 years, and so much has happened in that time. But a lot of who he was influenced very much by his earlier life, so I thought I'd better start there. In those days, when his father left the family, there was no financial help for single mothers. Warwick, at just 12 years old, intelligent, capable and responsible, became the man of the house. He lied about his age to get a job, delivering telegrams, and gave everything he earned to his much-loved mother. He took his little brother to and from preschool every day during his first 2 years of high school. With his older sister, he cooked evening meals for the family and refereed his 3 younger brothers. When his mother later remarried while he was at university, he supported himself by driving double shifts of taxis at weekends and often went hungry. His family was scattered and he had no home, an experience which made the family we created together very important to him. At the birth of both of our daughters, he was with me by choice, which was very unusual in those days. And he was absolutely ecstatic at becoming a father. There was nothing he wouldn't do for his girls. It was while spending our honeymoon sailing a 12-foot dinghy around Pittwater that I started to realise that actually sailing was the love of his life, closely followed by bushwalking, with me coming up a rather poor third. I have to say that did change over time. After our marriage, he started on his dream of building a 40-foot reinforced concrete trimaran, on which we were going to live. I was so madly in love with him, I went along with this rather harebrained scheme, but by the time Sarah was born, the trimaran wasn't finished, and it very quickly became obvious that we wouldn't all fit into it anyway. However, he went on to build a number of small boats, canoes and kayaks. I've lost count of how many, and in our last years on the coast owned a 40-foot yacht. Even so, he came very willingly to the mountains when Sarah and Conrad moved here with Tom, his first grandchild, saying that Tom meant more to him than any boat. His love of the bush, and especially the Blue Mountains, started when in his early teens he came up here with the Scouts one weekend, arriving late at Blackheath Station, walking out to Goddard's Leap in the dark and camping there overnight. On waking in the morning, he was absolutely astounded by the sight of the magnificent Grouse Valley. And after walking down to Blue Gum Forest, he was hooked for life. It was one of the first bushwalks he took me on after our marriage, and I got hooked too. He loved walking in the bush, but with that came also his strong sense of personal responsibility to care for it. He did both bush care and remote bush care with the Conservation Society, and used to go out every morning when broom was in bloom in Wentworth Falls to get rid of it. At 77, he was the oldest walker on the Miles Dunphy Memorial Walk just months before we realised he needed a triple heart bypass. And in the last few years before his MND diagnosis, his legs already getting weaker, he really loved going on Hugh Spears walks, exploring the Gardens of Stone. He worked on the Opera House as an estimator during the first years of our marriage, but he never liked desk work. Once he found building as a career, he found the means to work in the way he liked best, in his own business and in a very practical way. He enjoyed working with tools, and he was extremely good at everything he did. He never had to advertise. The quality of his work kept him constantly employed. He renovated 3 homes for us in Sydney and on the coast. Then when we moved up here, he did another 3, as well as building a flourishing storage business. He did all these things while being a very active contributor to the life of the community. On the coast, he started the Arimba Overlanders, a bushwalking group that began when we invited friends to join us on the Great North Walk from Sydney to Newcastle. In the mountains, he helped organise bushwalks with friends and took groups from Consop down to walk in the snowy mountains in summer. When I was involved in coordinating a number of resident and environmental actions on the coast and in the mountains, he was unfailingly supportive of me with his time and skills, and never grumbled about the household chaos or often astronomical phone bills. He happily donated large sums of money to organisations concerned with social and environmental justice. Over the years, he supported his children and many of our friends in large and small ways with his practical skills. He loved doing all sorts of activities with his grandchildren, and a few years ago, he became a very happy member of the Blackheath Heathens Choir. Over our time together, it became clear that the strong attraction we felt for each other was, in fact, an extreme case of the attraction of opposites. Although a friendly man, Warwick was largely a loner, very focused on whatever project was at hand, and a man of action. I was the deep and meaningful type, inclined to think for a long while before deciding on an action, and more of a people person. This resulted in a fair bit of headbutting in the early years, though our differences were of style, not substance. Our values were totally aligned. We never disagreed about the important things: money, the children, politics, social justice. Looking back, I sometimes find myself wondering just what we did argue about. Eventually, we came to really understand and value our different perspectives. And although even in the early years we'd accomplished a great deal together, in later years we became a very loving, harmonious, and even more effective team. When I suggested moving to the house we share now with Zoe and her family, he immediately agreed, although he was 70 and had just finished renovating and extending our house in Pritchard Street, and clearly Falls Road was going to be a huge job. And he re-roofed the entire house the next year, aged 71, after a roofing contractor refused the job because it was too difficult. He so often told me how glad he was to be living here, with the ability it gives us all to help each other and our grandchildren all around us, delighting us with their antics. Early after his diagnosis with MND 15 months ago, I asked Warwick if he had a bucket list, thinking we could do perhaps some things on it while he was still relatively mobile. He looked at me with the most beautiful expression on his face and said, "I just want to look after you. And now, because of him, I'm not alone. Even though he's no longer here, he is still looking after me, after all of us."
Thank you. Beautifully, bravely done. I think Craig and Conrad together. Going to speak.
Obviously, I'd just like to thank you all very much for coming. For those of you who I've never met, my name is Craig, and I'm married to Zoe. And I won't stand up here, I feel too tall. I've had the great privilege to share the last 12 years of my life under the same roof as Warwick, and to try and even put the depth of that into words would trivialise how intimate and how real and sincere it is to share 12 years of your life with someone like that. It's been just an incredible privilege for me. Warwick was not a man built for the 21st century. He found the challenges and the senselessness of this century to really frustrate him. The false and endless promises of technology making a better life that tended to continually fail. And having been his personal IT guy for the last 8 years, I did see him struggle and suffer. He was a man built for another time, and he was right in seeing the endless need and shopping and the false promises that were given to so many of us in this century, that things are better when really they may not be. And he worked in his own time, in his own space. In seeking to find some words and not using the word soul or spirituality, I came up with the word of the everlasting man. So to discuss the inner workings, the inner landscape of Warwick, I chose that word, the everlasting man. And Warwick's everlasting man was very much hewn by his love and reading of philosophy. It was physics and reason and ethics that were his trinity, and it gave him a very strong moral compass. And that, with the endless love of his wife Robin and her very wise counsel, he lived well. He really did, by choice and through conscience. In the last 12 years, I did see Warwick live his life well. I saw him very active and do lots and lots of different things. I also saw him get older. I saw him challenged with extreme hearing loss and the isolation that brings. I watched him have a triple bypass and then later get diagnosed with MND. And Warwick has a lot of successes in his life, but I think one of the most impressive ones was his continuity and his equanimity. Through all of those changes, he he remained very strong and he remained balanced, and they never knocked him down, not once. And as a man, it's very remarkable to see that. I won't go on too much, but look, courage is not the absence of fear. It's in facing our fears that we draw from the very wellspring of those fears. We draw our courage and our strength. And for all of you who know Warwick, who you've known him probably a lot longer than I have, I would like you to know he was courageous to the very end. He was incredibly brave, and he was a remarkable man. Now, he's not a man of faith, but I am. So please bear with me or join with me while I say a very quick prayer on behalf of his life. Merciful God, I thank you so much for the chance to know Warwick, and I thank you for each and every day of his life. I pray very much that he would be at peace, and I thank you that I could call him my father and my friend. Amen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Conrad. I'm Warwick and Robin's other son-in-law. Warwick, a loving husband, father-in-law, and grandfather. I had the privilege to know him for just over 30 years. One of my earliest memories of Warwick was when he was helping Sarah move house. My first impressions of him were of him being a loving father and someone who approached the challenges of moving methodically with great skill and wisdom. Warwick welcomed me to the family with open arms, and Sarah and I moved in with them in the early days of our marriage to save some pennies to buy our first home. Living together with them was a very special time that is etched into my memory forever. Warwick was always measured and thoughtful and rarely seemed to be rattled by anything. Nothing was too hard for him, and I saw this when he renovated our home single-handedly, using his extensive knowledge and building and design to give our house a unique character. He was also a great teacher with a lot of patience. A week before his passing, barely able to speak coherently, he was instructing me on how to fix a broken down pipe. He took us skiing on a couple of occasions and tried to teach me cross-country, but I think I failed him miserably. On the other hand, I marveled at his skiing abilities at his age. Sailing was another one of his many skills. On one occasion, he and I went sailing from Brisbane border to the Hawkesbury. We came to the Rip Bridge, a narrow rocky channel that was difficult to navigate with the tide going out. And he said, "Here you are, you're in control of the rudder while I fix the sails." I'd never sailed before, so it was a nervous moment, but we got through without a drama. He had this way of trusting people that could put anyone at ease and encouraged you to take new challenges. For this, I will always remember him. I had lots of wonderful experiences canoeing with him in the creeks around Orimba and going on many a bushwalk with the family. Warwick always had time for you. He was a good listener and was willing to help. When his first grandchild, Tom, was born, it gave him immense joy, and he made beautiful wooden toys for him with his trademark practical and elegant design. He was always involved with our kids and taught them many life skills, from camping to carpentry, and was always there for them on grandparents' days and school presentations. I'll never forget how he did the boys' hair for Wacky Hair Day. He took wacky hair to another level. He never missed a birthday party and was always there for the family. Warwick also had a keen interest in food and cooking, from foraging to preserving, and the pantry reflected produce from the garden and the neighbourhood. We look forward to his delicious Morello cherry jam every Christmas. Warwick was a great problem solver and lateral thinker. He was very clever and always found ways to recycle, using his skill and resourcefulness to give objects an extended life. He was a very disciplined person and an early riser, highly organized, intelligent, witty and very clever with language. He loved doing the crosswords and puzzles in the newspaper every morning and excelled at these, even on the day he passed away. He took a keen interest in environmental and Aboriginal issues and was always there supporting Robin with her environmental campaigns. I would like to close by reading a couple of lines from Khalil Gibran's The Prophet on Joy and Sorrow. When you are joyous, look deep in your heart and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight. Thank you, Warwick, for being a part of our lives, and farewell.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, Craig. So now Tom and Danny will share their reflections on their time with their beloved Pa.
Builder, sailor, bushwalker, cross-country skier, activist, crossword champion. Pa was all of these and more, but most importantly, he was a wonderful grandfather, father, and husband. Pa was caring, hardworking, generous, honest, and intelligent. All his grandchildren have very fond memories of him. He would play dress-ups with us, teach us how to tie knots, buy us chop tops at Mount Vic Flicks, and take us sailing and bushwalking. He was there every Christmas to cut the ribbons on our presents with his trusty pocket knife. He loved playing with his grandkids and taught us many great lessons, but the ones he showed us through his actions stood out the most. He showed us how to work hard, be stoic, live simply, and treat others with kindness. I have some especially fond memories with Pa. I can remember helping him when he was building the house in Pritchard Street. I just loved being there and watching a master at work. Although I probably was not the most helpful colleague, he never became irritated or frustrated with me. He was always willing to let us help and teach us how to do things. He would show you how and then have full trust that you could do it yourself. If you got it wrong, he would just show you again and let you have another try. He never cast judgment upon you or seemed frustrated or rushed, and he just loved to spend time with his grandchildren. Pa's memory, knowledge, and wisdom were truly admirable. On a skiing trip we took with him in 2018, when he was 80, mind you, I remember him telling us about combustion engines based on a book that he'd read when he was just 10 years old. He had such a great knowledge of the Snowy Mountains area, but even more impressive was his ability to ski long cross-country tracks at his age. He was a true stoic, capable of enduring more than the average person, and all without a single complaint. Pa was a great man. He set such a wonderful example to his grandchildren and gave us so much joy. We are all so grateful for the time spent and memories made with him. If I can be half the man Pa was, I'll be twice the man I ever thought I could be.
The earliest clear memory I have of Pa is of the time he took me camping when I was around 6 or 7. We pitched a tent in the garden of Pa and Grandma's old house, not quite the wilderness, but it was one of the greatest thrills of my young life. Through his passion and great skill in outdoor activities, he gave us so many wonderful experiences. We spent many hours bushwalking and he showed us beautiful places like the Gardens of Stone. He taught us how to row, and he, Danny and I rowed down the Nepean River in a boat that he built. There were many summer trips to the beach and several memorable skiing trips, the last just a few years ago. At home, he was always busy, although he never seemed rushed. When I was a toddler, the question I constantly asked was, "What's Pa doing?" And whoever was minding me would take me to find Pa and see what he was doing. His work was a source of great intrigue for all his grandchildren. We treasure the hours we've spent playing among stacks of bricks and mountains of dirt, using Pa's hammers to conduct archaeological digs, and learning countless lessons as we helped him with his work. Teaching came naturally to him. With endless patience and kindness, he imparted many practical skills to us. Among them, splitting firewood, building and mending furniture, making jam, and cooking pancakes. On long car trips to the beach, he and Grandma taught us songs. Pa loved the funny ones, and I was particularly impressed with his recital from memory of a long and very funny Irish song called Slattery's Mounted Foot. He read widely throughout his life on a range of topics, from physics to philosophy, history to politics, and was always ready to share his vast knowledge of the world with us. Pa taught us most by the example of how he lived his life. He was a true gentleman, respectful, kind, and honest. Everyone he met was his equal. He was just as comfortable talking to tradies, artists, or academics, and in all the time we spent together, I never heard him talk down to anyone or about anyone. He called me 2 days before he died while I was travelling in Tasmania. Although talking was a great effort for him by then, he told me about his fond memories of sailing around Tasmania in a tall ship. Pa's full and adventurous life is an inspiration to his grandchildren. He possessed great determination, ingenuity, enthusiasm, and an unwavering commitment to the things he believed in. The value of the natural world, the importance of holding yourself to high standards, and his great dedication to the people he loved. We are all so lucky to have had him as a grandfather. Thank you.
Thank you guys, well done. Sarah and Zoe will now share some thoughts on their dad.
When I think of my dad, I feel an enormous amount of love for a father who was both strong and gentle. He always made it clear to Sarah and I that there was nothing he wouldn't do to help us in absolutely any way possible. He once told me this with tears in his eyes. I will always remember him gently stroking my arm while I sat next to him at the dinner table, his face full of love. Dad had a way of not letting the frustrations of life affect his manner with us. I think we will all miss hearing him curse about a building mistake, a hammered thumb, or more recently, his struggles with the internet or his mobile phone. Yet despite life's difficulties and some mistakes, he remained a devoted and supportive father. Sarah and I grew up with some lovely family traditions which Mum and Dad both created. There are many, but one of my favourite ones was to be woken up on a Sunday morning to the sound of the music from Carnival of the Animals floating down the hall. This was a sign that Dad's delicious pancakes were on the way, to be eaten while listening, enthralled every time, to the story of Peter and the Wolf, which followed the music. Traditions like this were like love in action, acts of consistent caring. Mum and Dad took us on a great adventure by moving our family to an old, run-down farmhouse on 60 acres at Arimba when I was 4 years old. All of my childhood memories are there, and so many involve living with a dad who was always drafting up plans for renovation, scraping, patching and painting plaster ceilings and walls, and creating a truly lovely home for his family. This has had a huge impact on my life, encouraging me to use my hands to create beautiful things. I have learned many skills from my dad, restoring rooms, ceilings and furniture in our shared home, and enjoying every minute of it. 12 years ago, my husband Craig and I and Ruby embarked on a new family adventure, buying a house here in Wentworth Falls with Mum and Dad, and living in it while it was being renovated by Dad and many other tradesmen. Again, I watched and appreciated his fine craftsmanship as he carried out an enormous renovation in order to create yet another beautiful home for his family. During this time, our family grew with the births of Audrey and Manning, and in this household, more happy memories were created, as you will see in the slideshow. Dad had always hoped that he and Mum could share a home with at least one of their daughters one day. For me, this has meant that Craig and I could help Mum and Dad through these recent difficult times, just as they have helped us in our busy times when the children were little. Again, love in action between all of us. Dad showed a great sense of foresight in his business projects and has built a highly successful storage business, which was his way of providing for us even once he was gone. So he literally built the roof over our heads at the age of 71, and he also worked relentlessly to create a business to support us into the future. His love was evident to us through his actions, and because of that, he died just as he had lived, surrounded by love with all of his beloved family gathered around him in the home that he had made. Thank you, Dad.
Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for your presence here today. We really appreciate it. My dad was a kind, gentle, intelligent man who loved building and making things and being out in nature, bushwalking, cross-country skiing and sailing. When we were growing up, there were rowboats, canoes and sailing boats, several of which he made himself, and we had a lot of fun mucking around in them. He taught me how to sail in his little wooden mirror dinghy with the lovely red sail, and I remember a wonderful weekend trip with one of my friends when we played Swallows and Amazons, sailing out to an uninhabited island in Tuggerah Lake and camping overnight. In later years, he progressed to a small yacht, and I will never forget sailing out of Sydney Harbour one day and up the coast to Gosford, the feeling of freedom as we flew along with the wind. Another treasured memory is sailing up the Hawkesbury River and sleeping in the boat. We couldn't see any buildings or roads and imagined what it might have been like before white people came, and in the night we saw magical green phosphorescence in the water. We walked every Easter in the Blue Mountains and sometimes around the Central Coast too, although we never joined Dad's intrepid overnight walks. I was only about 8 or 9 when he decided I was ready for cross-country skiing. Dad and I travelled by overnight train to Goulburn. They served us dinner with Fanta to drink and we slept on the train. In the early hours of the morning, we caught a taxi with several other people, then a bus, I think, and eventually ended up in Perisher Valley. Dad spent a little while teaching me how to use my skis. Then we put on our backpacks and headed up to Cooma Hut, which was right at the top of the mountain. I think we only got a few hundred metres before he realised I wasn't ready for skiing up mountains yet. We trudged the rest of the way through the snow with Dad carrying our skis. Once we got there, it was magic. The hut was just above the tree line, and once the lifts stopped in the evening, the quirky collection of cross-country skiers had the mountain to themselves. I loved it and came back year after year for more adventures. We were never pressured to join in Dad's outdoor pursuits, but he was always willing to organise everything and teach us the skills if we were keen. I don't think I would have done any of those things if not for him, and I'm so glad he gave me those experiences. He shared his love of the bush with many other people as well by leading and organising bushwalking groups over the years, and was active in bush care and other conservation activities. Dad's other great love was building houses and making and fixing things. He was a highly skilled craftsman with meticulous attention to detail and a love of simple, elegant design. He was great at finding ingenious ways to fix anything broken or just to make things work better. there was always a wonderful shed where he'd spend much of his time, often listening to classical music while he worked. His tools were so well organised, with all sorts of recycled containers crafted into storage for nails, drill bits and such, each labelled in his beautiful handwriting. My favourite was the shed at Arimba, down below the dam overlooking the paddock and the trees. It was spacious, and he crafted a beautiful wooden boat in there. Tom loved to visit Pa's shed when we lived at Arimba in his early years. Dad was very intelligent and interested in the world, a sort of walking encyclopedia, and delighted in such things as how amazing it is that wounds heal themselves and how clever bees are. Crosswords and Scrabble were great pleasures, and he read widely, particularly as his mobility decreased in later years. In more active days, he loved dressing up and didn't mind a good hat either. I remember him and Mum taking my boys to Sydney for an exhibition of tall ships, all 4 of them riding the train in full pirate regalia. Dad donned his pirate gear again for a day spent with the boys on Wentworth Falls Lake, complete with skull and crossbones flag on the boat and much swashbuckling. Dad was a kind and generous man and demonstrated this mainly by doing things for people. He was always using his practical skills to help others, family, friends and community, and he was generous with money and time to Zoe and I. He cared for his parents in their old age and was very involved with his grandchildren. He was kind to animals too. One favourite memory is of a cranky old goose that he couldn't bear to kill. He stuck it in a backpack and carried it to the dam at the top of the hill to live there, with the goose pecking his head madly the whole way. Dad accepted his diagnosis of MND with grace and faced the challenges it posed with stoic strength and courage. He never complained, never asked why me, and showed no fear of death. He remained as active and engaged with life as possible to the very last. Just 3 days before he died, Mum found him out near the garden shed in his new electric wheelchair, looking for a piece of metal to make a ramp for the driveway so he could drive the wheelchair into town. He could barely eat, speak or stand, but he dressed immaculately every day. On the day he died, he did the crossword in the morning, ate a lemon tart against doctor's orders, and was determined to get down to his storage business in the afternoon to check on something. Dad was a man of action rather than words, but there is no doubt the greatest love in his life was his family, and most especially mine. He told us very often how much he loved the fact that we all live close together. So it feels very right that he died peacefully at home with all of us surrounding him. He bowed out graciously while he was still himself, and that was good. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. We will now look back on Warwick's life in a photo presentation. They'll appear on these screens from taken